everyone, and welcome back to the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. My name is Kris, and I am here with my completely worked out. Are you worked out? I feel like you are. You look like you already are. Co-host, and her name is
Hi, everyone. It's Rachel. How are you?
Rachel's here. Okay, so Rach, I am like always intrigued by us. Let me just say that. 'Cause among the many things we do as friends and as, buddies, is we send each other articles back and forth or little vignettes or maybe a little Instagram post or things that are like, hey, this is kind of interesting. You might enjoy this, or this is kind of something that you might want to look at. So something that you sent me recently that I was like, like my head exploded was this seemingly the little article, but it's massively dense on like the utility of happiness, essentially. Like, how do you get happiness as a woman effectively? We can talk about it from that vein.
Mm-hmm.
When you have all these challenges coming at you and all these demands coming at you.
Right.
So, what do you think today if we talk a little bit about, the article talks about having it all? Talk about having it all. Is it possible? How do we manage that? How do we manage our own constraints within that? How do we even approach it as just a concept, even from that standpoint? So thank you for the article because, of course, I love it. I'm a social scientist. In case anyone doesn't know that, that is my first love. That is my training in college. That is what I always go back to for any way that I think about life. I always said the one thing I got from college was it taught me how to think really, really, really effectively. Thank you, college. And support it. But I mean, it does. College is so expansive, right? It just gives you so many ways to think about things. And one of the big, because I have an MBA also, the big things is she's an economist. And so she flows through this conversation. So let's talk about happiness. Can you have it all? Is it even possible? If you can't, what parts do you want? And maybe you can start talking about even why you sent me that article.
Sure.
What was that for you?
Yeah. So I read the article and I was like, oh, this is right up your alley, Kris. Like the fact of like an economist writing about happiness. And she has a book, and that's obviously she's being interviewed about her book that's out, that's Having It All. And what the data tells us about women's lives.
And what is her name? We'll have to put it. We'll put all the links in. Everything.
Corrine Lowe.
Corrine Lowe from Wharton.
Yeah.
Very
yeah.
important. Yeah.
And what the data tells us about women's lives and getting the most out of yours. And I was like, for me, I love the data. I love science. I'm always like, what's the science behind that? Why does it?
Yep.
Yeah. Like I just
love figuring it out and then having like a little cube that it can fit in because this data point goes here and that data point goes there. And then, Yeah.
So and I love when things that aren't necessarily represented in our lives in data, how we can look at them from that more, tangible, like logical
objective
way.
Almost.
Objective way. Yeah. And so for me personally, this was like, oh, this is super interesting. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is Kris. And then I thought, oh my gosh, this is Grateful Not Greedy, right?
This is everybody.
Yeah.
This is everyone.
This is a great way to think about it. And, what is having it all and what does that look like? And so, it was on Substack, the article that I read, and it was super helpful. And then I haven't tapped into the book yet, but I'm intrigued. And we're both like, it's on our list now.
Yeah, it's going to go on my Audible, like when we're done with this call. And then maybe we can do a supplemental that'll be even more impactful because it can breed in like all that information that she's bringing forth. But I definitely have the concept and I definitely know where she's going with this. And I 100% agree. And you're right, the data points are relevant, especially vis-a-vis men to women. I think that's a relevant thing. It's not to man bash or any of that kind of stuff too, but that we'll get into that.
Yeah, and she even said, she's like, this is focused on women, but it also applies to men. And in the article, it talks a little bit, and I was like, oh, that applies to everyone. But she, like, the point was like there's a push for like that traditional push for women of our success is based on our career and advancement, and actually happiness often, and like when you really sit down and look at it, it's family, it's leisure, it's other pursuits. And so why, this is where maybe and I feel bad. There's a moment there that I'm like, oh man, like we're taking on the same thing that a man takes on in general. But then I was like, but why does a man get happiness from his pursuits as well? Like, is that applicable to them? And so
Hmm. Right.
even though like it's getting put upon us, I look at like, but maybe they didn't even want to put upon them either. Like this doesn't, I might not be fulfilled by my career advancement. And I made a very clear decision in my life to step out of my big career, my busy life to live in Hawaii. And that's been the decision that's been, amazing for me. And that's for me, right? But the idea of like, that extra that got put on women of like, oh, we need to lean into our careers and that's how we're measured and we need to be the same and all of this stuff. And it's like, but we have other pursuits. And then we also there's layers that it goes into. But what I want to hit on is like, she asked a really great question. And I wrote it down and it said, imagine a world without constraint. You're wealthy. You don't have to worry about money. What would your life look like and how would you spend your time? And she's like, and that will give you insight into what is it what drives your happiness? And it's like, I used to think it's like getting to this level in my career, getting to this position, getting to this this place. And now I realize that's not it for me. And so another way to look at it is like what fills your cup and how are you filling your cup every day? Like what are the things that fills your cup? And brings you joy. And that's the question is it doesn't necessarily mean it's your career or it's your traditional way of looking at it. It could be something very different.
Okay. So there's like a lot in there, super loaded. And thank you for all those delineations. What I want to start with is, if you'll indulge me, is this.
Sure.
The piece that when you talk about even just that central concept, right? This is a little kind of, I feel like this is going to sound academic as a podcast. And so if you're into that, take that side of it. But there is a lot of mush in here. Like there's a lot of feel goods and
Sure.
like a lot of subjective kind of just feeling like emotion in this conversation, especially for me, because I have one of these situations that you're talking about, leaving a career, but not really leaving the skills of the career, being kind of
Mm.
like pulled in that way. So something I find this very interesting as a concept. So when she asks, it's essentially like, if money's no object, what do you do? Which is something, I entertain that as
Sure.
a question personally. I often ask that of other people to get at what is their life about, what do they dream about, what drives them. So and I have daughters, so I'm in the
Mhm.
conversation with daughters, and I have sons, so I'm in the conversation with sons, and a lot of these conversations are the same about finding something that it's not just about finding, oh, let's find something that makes you happy. What she also talks about, which is very relevant, is finding ways that you can be happy in the long term. So the career thing is really interesting, and the money thing is really interesting. First, just tactically, it's almost an esoteric question, right? Like, if money's no object, for most people, that's not
Right.
reality. So I appreciate it as an exercise to get what is relevant to you, and I also appreciate economically. I also appreciate the tactical parts that are like, not everyone has a choice just to give up your career. And even like
Yeah.
me or you quote unquote give up your career. You do not give up any of the skills. You are still very much in charge of everything in your family and everything, not just like, which cereal I buy, but which investments am I going to do? How is my
Right.
401k set up? What's the benefit plan going to be for our business? Which insurance policies do I need to make sure that we have? How do I want the mortgage set up? I mean, all of this goes under, you know,
Yeah.
my or your purview.
So let me reframe that question. The exercise of doing that question was to evaluate what's in your life right now and what are you bringing forward. It wasn't like leave your job and go pursue like
No, I get
traveling
that.
around the world like a
Yeah,
vagabond.
yeah, I get
Like the
that.
idea of the question is like, are you getting in those pieces along with your like requirements for daily living, right? Or like to be
Okay.
able to support yourself, to do all that stuff. And
Right.
the push though in society is, well, that's based on the success of your career. And it's like, well,
Yes.
is it
Yeah,
really?
it's the
Like it's
most
not.
overt, challenge that we
Totally.
have to our who
Yeah.
we are.
And so then how do you stay in touch with it? And one of the other things she does say is she's like, this needs to be regularly evaluated because we change, we evolve, we have different priorities at different times.
Yep.
And I mean, you're right. This conversation, there's so many layers of what she discussed in there. And I'm sure when we get into the book, there's going to be tons of layers. But the first step is like, where, um, how is that push on us driving us, right?
Yeah.
How is that push on us to measure our success, our quote unquote happiness on how we are advancing in our career, right? Of
So
how
let
we
me
are.
let me just address that even because we just talked about this with my finance as being like my finance career as being one of my big regrets.
Yes.
And what's relevant in that conversation is even in that there's so many layers, but what's relevant in that conversation is to look at is that regret about my career advancement or anyone who has one of these similar kind of situations, is that about my career advancement or is that about the process? Like I was saying, even in that podcast, is you do things to and not even just to achieve but to give yourself confidence to do more things, to do the next level, to do can if I've done this, can I do this? So you go and you do hard things and you get in a position where now you can do the next hard thing, which is have this job in finance, and then maybe the next hard thing, which is to have this next job in finance. And that is the piece that I believe, that I was kind of getting at. And what I was missing is not so much like, oh, yeah, of course I can do finance now. I can't do finance as a 28-year-old, young gun.
Yes.
I can't do that. And that leaves a lot on the table, certainly in terms of just straight out capital, but also in the terms of personal capital, because then you have to create, just like we have to create other areas that we can show ourselves that we're quote unquote successful. And I think that's not, I'm just going to speak personally, that people can
Mhm.
comment, light it up, but it's not as easy to get those personal accolades yourself. You have to, I believe in my life, I have to work harder to pat myself on the back to say when you did a great job as a mom today. I mean, I had a mommy moment this morning that I'm still like, in my head about, with my daughter just driving to school. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I really ruin her in sixth grade from this one thing that she's talking about, And like, that's what I'm evaluating. I don't have the obvious kind of like, oh, at work, we got that deal done. And then
Yeah.
we, made all these trades today. We made X amount of dollars. The traders did great. I did my little analysis. It's pretty, like you're saying, like objectively, it's pretty buttoned up. But when you go into these more amorphous roles, which is I'm a mom, I'm a business person, I'm an admin, I'm a dog
Mhm.
walker, I'm a, whatever. Then I feel like to your point about happiness, it's so relevant that we find ways that we can, as women or men, whatever your situation is, if you're the person who has stepped off from this career, I can't speak to the people who stayed in their career because I haven't done that. But if you're the person who stepped off, to find ways to link your desires and what you're doing with happiness. By
Mm.
example, to your point, I love taking care of my kids. I do. I love it because I don't want anyone else doing it. Like,
Right.
and it's not to say like I don't have help or whatever, but I have those children for a reason. The reason I have children is because I want them to have a great experience of life. I want to be part of that experience of life. I believe I'm very well equipped to help them have a
Mhm.
really good balanced experience of life. So all of that gives me joy. And I don't get, we all know, like as moms or as parents, we
Mm.
don't get a lot of pats on the back. We don't get a lot of, and even if you're like, oh,
Right.
thanks, mom, that's great. We have to do that ourselves. So you can speak to that just in terms of
Sure.
that's so much of my happiness, even, taking my dog with me this morning to drop my daughter off. And it sounds so banal, right? Like, oh, I'm just taking my dog. But I was like, I'm giving my dog, like, he and I are having the best experience. This is the best part of his day. He's so pumped. I like roll down the window for him, give him like, his 3 minutes of like in the air before then we have to do something else. All of those little moments, you have to now be able to generate happiness from. and to reflect on that as that's something that you're doing to create happiness for someone else, but really for yourself.
Right. And, I think part of it comes from she talks about this in the article of you say like you're an amazing mom, Chris. You're like one of my mom role models, right? Of
Thank you
how
for
you're
saying that.
raising your kids with the
It's something that I
intention.
try. I really do put an effort
I
into.
know. And you do. And that's the other thing is you try and your effort and you're always looking at improving. Like you're always trying to understand what you can do better and to adjust. And you have four very different kids and I've watched you adjust, evolve and change for each one. And treat them as individuals, as unique beings, not as this is my clan, right?
Right.
Um, and I think that's beautiful. But the thing that she points out in this article is that extra onus on us as parents is very different than how we were raised. And we
Yes.
are required, like we have the push, there's a push in society that we need to spend more time with our kids and support them more, which I agree with, right? Like I agree that I value my time with my son. I carve it out more. Like it's like when he comes home, I make myself present, all of those things. But nothing got taken off our plates when that was
No.
put on.
No.
So then the question, and this is where like her analysis comes in, like you keep adding more to the plate, and then what's left? Like we didn't get 26 hours in a day when this was added on. We still have 24. We still have all these
Right.
things. And so how do we balance that? And it is to me, this is like the balance of being a parent, a balance of being grateful, not greedy, of how do we balance that push because it's something you and I are both passionate about being the best parents we can possible to our kids and the push of like showing up more, but nothing else was taken off our list. Like you didn't
Yeah.
reduce the amount of stuff you have to do in your daily life. You didn't take away your responsibilities. You didn't stop doing all of these things. And it's like, wow. And so that's the question is like, when that happens, how are you balancing your, like, my guess is for me, I know sometimes my self-care, my stuff gets pushed off
Right.
because
Yeah.
these other things come in. And that's the evaluation of that, right? That is the evaluation. And so I am like you, like this is my favorite job ever is raising my son. Like I take great pride in it. And it is like, it's probably one of the things I am most proud of. Like I can tell you about my career and I'm like, yeah, that was amazing. But this is like, when I talk about it, you see me sparkle and shine because it is what brings me happiness. And I can look at it and really look at him and be super proud of the job I've done so far. And that is like, that brings me a lot of joy.
You're hitting on
However, I didn't
so many points. Yeah. This is great.
yeah, but I didn't give myself grace to like understand I was taking on more, right? I didn't give
Yeah.
myself like that space of being like, wow, I'm doing this intentionally. I'm doing this. And
Right.
what else am I taking away? How am I maintaining like it brings me joy to take care of him, but then there's that self-care piece, right? And that like prioritizing your needs like we talked about before and so it just becomes an interesting I like this art because it makes me think about like, okay, what am I doing? And not just moving through my day, but intentionally moving through my day, intentionally thinking about like, where am I spending my time? Where is my energy? Is this part of those key priorities in my world, right? That, being a present mother, right?
Yeah.
Does that still play into it?
I feel like where we can really help ourselves and maybe help other people in this conversation is the responsible just exactly what pick up where you were talking about that and the responsibility that we have to ourselves and by extension to our family or whatever, but really to
Mm,
ourselves to either set the boundaries, create the happiness, create the time, do the self care, do that rather than because the greed is I'm doing everything. I'm
mm,
so exhausted. And we all know as moms and business people and everything else, hot, that it's a I don't know, is it a 15, 17-hour day every day. It's not like I'm not. I always say I've always joked since I was like a very first married, but even like when I started having kids, I'm like I'm not at Neiman's every day having lunch. I'm not shopping every day. I barely have time to like buy myself a new pair of shoes. I get them online. And not to say I don't do any of that, but I don't I don't position the time. That's not how I'm spending my time. I can truthfully say I work all day long. And whatever I'm doing, it's pretty much work, maybe an hour here of a workout, that kind of thing, but I'm working all the time. So I think where we can be helpful is in the management of our own truth, our own expectations, our own setup for success. How is this going to look? How am I going to evaluate my this when she talks about, your utility function? How am I going to evaluate my utility function? And this is only to yourself, because this is, I believe, a conversation that you cannot outsource. You can't,
No.
a lot of times we're saying like, oh, get the 360 evaluation, get feedback from other people, see where you might be going off. And even in looking at that, even you saying, Kris, I watched you, be a mother for X amount of, years. I've watched you be a wife for X amount of years. I've watched you be a whatever for X amount of years. And I can say from my vantage point, that I would say that about you. You have said that about me, that we know we have clear, objective people who can reflect that for us. So in light of that, one of the things I remember even a long time ago when my kids were small, and all of my mom friends work in some capacity, either like I do in like a quote unquote family business situation where we're running a big chunk of what goes on there, or on the back end, deciding how all that financial piece fits together. My friends are like this, or they're going into offices and doing that, or they're doctors, or, whatever. They've got, most of my friends work. So work and work.
Right.
Like have other pursuits and all this. I don't know any. Oh, we have one mom. We have one mom who doesn't. We don't really know what she does all day. Like there's just like one mom. Honestly, we're like, what does she do? Like what? What? I won't even name any names, but honestly, we're like, we really have no idea what she does all day long.
Right.
Okay, that's one out of probably maybe 30 in that example. But we always said, I used to, for the schools, I used to make sure that they had my husband's number and my number. Always. They have my husband's email, they have my email. Who gets the call? All the time. I don't even put
Yes.
primary. I could put him as primary, primary, primary. Who's getting the call? I am. I'm getting the call. And my friends who are, doctors and, busy in the ER and doing all this kind of stuff, like they're getting the call. So even in the space where you're like, okay, we have two working, two people working outside the home, quote unquote, like whatever they're doing, the woman is going to take the brunt of the childcare. The woman is going to take the brunt of, little things around the house. I don't know, maybe if your husband's into being handy or whatever, that's different for you. But the brunt of what I call myself a lot is I have the rover position. So I don't know if you know baseball or softball or whatever. Rover is like that extra position that kind of sometimes could be second base, sometimes could be shortstop, but really they have to kind of cover anywhere from first base to third base. Like that whole, complex is them. So, or actually you extend that into the outfield a little bit too. So I feel like
Right.
I have a rover position. So when there's ever something that is not very specifically defined as this is your job, it becomes my job. Right.
It's
So
true.
this is
Yeah.
where, and I don't need to make this a whole conversation about chores and everything else, but she talks about that too. And so even in positioning that to say, because it's like, okay, yes, we have dishwashers and we have, microwaves and stuff like that now, but who's running those? Do you have an equal split? I mean, I don't know. Every example I have of great marriages, shared space, all that. Just the woman is picking up a lot of the extra slack. Now, this is where I'm talking about. Let's have the conversation about being responsible. Uh, that could just be choice, or that could be martyrdom, or that could be habit, or that could be not paying
Totally.
attention. Right. So, I think, okay, let's talk about this whole thing and kind of get to where we can be powerful in this conversation. So I believe we can be powerful in this conversation in taking responsibility for the happiness. What does that
Mhm.
mean to you? And to your point, getting clear on the answer to that question. If money's no object and every day you have the chance to, live your life, however, because you do have that power in perspective. you do have the power to be perspectively accurate to spend your day that way. So, example, if you're saying, "Oh, every day what I would do is I would go save the world. I would go to Cambodia and I would work in orphanages and I would do all this." Well, you have the opportunity to do that right here to create that same
Mhm.
mood, right? To create that feeling that you want to feel by going to work in those orphanages in Cambodia, right? It's like a check yourself. Because is that about you saying, "Oh, I do all this work in Cambodia. I help the children. Oh, I'm so amazing." Or is it about you generating the happiness from having helped someone else, from having helped a child who, couldn't
Yeah.
read yet and you taught them to read, right? And now with technology, there's so many ways to have access to these options that I would like to explore that even in this conversation because happiness can be anything to you, but if it's going to be externalized, it's not happiness. That's something else. That's
Right.
egotism. That's, look at me. That's, aren't I great? Right? That's something else. Happiness is an internalized state of bliss, an internalized state of contentment. So, in my world, I believe that's accurate. Maybe, someone can correct me in the comments, but let's talk about how do we get that internalized state of contentment in the complexity of having it all, in the complexity of everything that comes out with
Yeah.
it. Us, we talked about as being busy householders, and in the complexity of knowing that we're the rover position, that my day doesn't stop from the second my eyes open. And sometimes I wait a little bit to open my eyes because I know the second they're open, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop until they're closed again. And even then, sometimes it peeks up in the middle of the night. It's like, hey, you still have this
Right.
to do. What about this? Anxiety, anxiety. So yeah. So how do we manage the contentment on a day to day basis in a responsible way? I think that's where the happiness part of having it all comes from.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of answering that question, like you said, is like, okay, if your ideal is this, how can you create that where you are? Like if that is gonna bring you joy. And like one of the examples was like sitting and reading a book in a quiet space. Well, okay, can you carve out a little time every day to create that for you? And
Yeah.
for me, it's like learning and understanding and growing in the understanding of the human body and how it ages and how to support it and being like as healthy as possible. Like that is like, I'd be like, I'd have this like these people here to help me understand my body, and I was like, I have access to that and I can do that on my own because we have the technology to do that. And I don't need that. So I can bring that in myself and give myself time and space for that. So it's finding that way, like, yes, grateful you have, and not greedy about it. It doesn't have to be someone else coming in, or it doesn't have to be going to Cambodia, to your point. It can still be achieved. So then it's like, what is that item that you've now discussed or you've
Mhm.
discovered that is like, you're like, that's my ideal? And then strip it away and say,
Yes.
what's behind that? I
Yes.
want to help people. I want to age as best as I can and feel strong and independent, like all of those things. Yes, great. That's it. All right. Or I want to read. I need quiet space and or I want to learn. Like, okay, great. Create that. And you can create that in a small impactful manner in your life, whether it's daily or weekly, but in a consistent way. And that's where like the greedy comes in, right? Grateful,
Yes.
like you
The
can do
greed is
this.
all
Don't be
over
greedy
this.
that it
We
has
talk
to
about our
be,
greed
yeah,
maps. Like greed is all over this conversation. I can just,
totally.
I can almost hear the monologues going on about, oh, I wish I had time for that. Oh, if I were this, if I did a, oh, and comparing yourself to
Yeah.
other people who you think don't have to work or you think have money for something or whatever. Yes, yes. Like there's so much
Right.
greed, even talking, because you don't recognize or don't want to recognize the responsibility and the option you have to make those choices different.
Yeah. And then I think one of the pushbacks could be is like, well, I just don't have time. And I would say,
Yes,
okay, I
that's
just did
that is
that
the
in my
greed.
life. I
That is
just
the greed. The
completed this.
greed of this conversation is I don't have
Yeah.
time for that. I don't have time for that. I can
Okay.
counter that with so
Here's
many
the here's
examples. Yeah.
Here's the, like, assignment I just did. I went through and opened up my little notepad, and I was like, "Okay, what do I do in a day? Like, what do I do in a week?" And I just, like, listed out, and I put them in categories, like, this is a high priority, can't be moved. This is medium. This is movable, but I'd like it still in my life. And this is like other, like I do it and I'm not sure why I'm still doing it question, which there was
Yeah.
no one there, right? And then I opened up a spreadsheet and schedule, and then I actually plugged things into it to see like where does everything fit? Where's my time and space? How am I using that? And how can I be more efficient to make sure I am getting these pieces in? And that was clarifying for me because then I realized like I'm doing this, it's not achieving my goal. Um, but I'm doing it because like A, either I enjoy it or B, out of habit or whatever it
Is
is,
the
you know.
the
And
goal happiness or the goal is something else? What's the goal?
okay,
You know,
so
what's my
the
goal?
it aligns with like how I would spend my life if there were no like
Okay,
money
so
was
the
no
yeah,
issue,
so what we're
like that
talking
type of
about,
thing.
your utility
So
function.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
for me, it came out of like living a strong and healthy life, you know, being present for my son and keeping my sparkle and shine, like being able to like be in a place where I, and then like there's other pieces of it. I was like still teaching yoga and still doing these things, but it doesn't, and in doing this, like this was on the list. And I was like, yes, this is important to me because it brings me so much joy. It encourages me to grow. It gives me
Oh, yeah.
this
I've grown
another
so much with
outlet.
this podcast. It's ridiculous.
Right. So like that made it on
Yeah.
the list. And I knew it takes X amount of hours per week for me. And I need to carve that out. And so it came from doing this exercise of like, what is it I want? What cups do I fill? Like, what do I want my life to look like? What am I actually doing with my life? And now can I lay it out in a way that I can see it visually and see where I have space to put in the things that I'm not getting in yet? To like make a little like to pull things out. Like, for example, one
I
of
gotta
my things is
you need
like,
to like, I think we all need to borrow this spreadsheet. So I'm gonna borrow your template, your spreadsheet. And then again, I don't know if I'm gonna have time to do it, Rach. I don't know if there's enough time for me to actually
okay,
go through that. Right. So
you know,
here it is again. So
I
here
had
it is, right?
yes, I
Because it's
had
like, what are the
it's an
commitments? Like what
investment. Yeah.
right. 'Cause what are you
Let's
gonna
go back to
complain
the
about after?
economics
You're
of
gonna
this.
complain that you don't have any happiness, or you don't have this, or you don't have that. But then you're not going to take the commitment to spend the I don't know how many hours, 2 hours, an hour and a half, 4 hours, whatever you need
It
to take to
yeah.
do that. Probably takes less
Well,
time than
so
you think.
making the list and also making the list, I put a notepad on my phone. I just started jot things down randomly for a couple days, like what's going on, what, and then I just like
Okay.
randomly. And then the other morning I woke up early is because my brain's firing and I have lots of things to do. And I woke up early and I was like, now is the perfect time to do this. Like it's 5:30 in the morning. No one's awake in my house. So
Right,
I can
right.
sit down in front of my
The birds
computer
aren't even
and
awake, really. Yeah.
I know, I literally pounded it out. And it was helpful to be able to look at it in that way, to be able to see where, because and then in hindsight, I went back and I thought about like, okay, so I have a busy life, busy full life. And I was like, but I was filling it, but I have actually a lot of space when I lay things out. And so I realized one of my challenges is if there's empty space, I will fill it, which is true,
Oh, meaning the
right?
challenge is you don't want to always be filling it.
Like, in filling it intentionally. So I
Right.
would
But right
fill
now
it
you're
with
filling it
things that don't
automatically.
match.
Yeah, I have this issue
Yeah,
too.
that
I have this issue too because we
don't
have
match with my
so
goals.
many things. Right, but I have so many things to do
Totally.
that it's just like I literally keep a running list. I have someone who helps me, and I'm like, "Can you just send me back that
Sure.
list?" And yeah, you're right. This dead space, and it's also the anxiety of knowing that you have a lot of walls of stuff behind you that you could do on any given day, and that anxiety of just letting it be like, hey, no one's gonna die here if I don't do those four things.
Yeah,
No,
the house
nothing's gonna
isn't
happen.
burning down.
House isn't burning down. I might lose a couple $100 in the market, but hey, you know what? Worse things have happened. Like, yeah, being chill with that piece. I totally
Yeah.
suffer from that. Yeah.
So, the
Remind me
exercise
the
of doing
buckets,
that,
Rach.
the
Remind me
exercise
the buckets. So, because I think this is actually a very helpful exercise. So, the buckets on your spreadsheet are what are your buckets? You said you have
like, of, like, the
like
movable
three.
and movable, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What are they called?
okay, so I coded them in 3 colors. I ended up making 3 buckets then. Like, pink was, like, cannot not movable, high priority, meaning, like, the time slot that I teach yoga. That's a high
Of course.
priority
Yeah.
for me. It brings me joy. It fills so many things, and it's an income, right? And
Oh,
so
yeah,
those
exactly.
don't get moved, and there are set time slot. And then I had yellow, which is like preparing dinner and like food prep and stuff, which is very important to me, but the time slot's not critical. I can
I
prep
see.
morning, I
Okay.
can prep previous day,
Right.
I can like move that around. And
Yeah.
then green is um uh it it's flexible. Like I have it here, it can kind of go anywhere. And it doesn't have to happen. Like it has like a little less like priority in my world. And so it's just like, and there were other, when I made the list, there were lots of variety of that. But like when I started to actually color code it, it helped me to understand like yellow has to stay present. It just is movable. Green can fall off and come back and it's not as critical. And then pinks are locked and loaded, like those cannot move. And, like getting Dax, ready for school and dinner with him and like, teaching yoga for the wrestling team, like those things are immovable in my world. Like those are the high priority for whether it's my requirements for living or whether my requirements for happiness, like
I feel
the
like this is
key
almost
ones.
maybe you're really I feel like this is even an opportunity to have some reflection from someone else also to like review that list with us. So as we put that together and it's like
Yes.
these are my pinks and because I feel like I would my little thing, my pink bucket would be like, like a freaking gender reveal.
Massive.
Like like there's pink everywhere. I'm like, everything's so important. It's a girl, like everything. Uh, and having someone kind of like getting someone to go through your closet with you, having someone
Totally.
be able to edit that for you and say, really, do you really need this? You really are going to wear this
Well,
again? You really are going
yeah,
to, this is the thing that you have to in this slot. Is that really accurate? Or if you're really evolved, you can ask yourself the question, you go back over it the second time because what you're distilling is so important. So I don't want to get lost. I don't want the forest to get lost in the trees here because the forest is you have one life. You have one
yes.
life, one amazing, precious life. What do you want to be, and it's not, we always say that like it doesn't live itself. It doesn't live itself. You are living it and you are living it in micro moments. So micro moments, add up to macro, add up to, your joy and happiness and something that we call a fulfilled life. So even distilling down the tasks or the way that you live your life or the way that you approach your friends or how many people you connect with, honestly, this is a huge conceptual framework to be able to put together intention when you're setting up your one precious, meaningful, fulfilling life.
And it's true. And the other part of it is your meaningful, like fulfilling life. And this was in the article as well, is that changes, right?
Yeah.
If I
Oh
did
yeah.
this 5 years ago, if I did this 10, if I did this before being a mom, like mine would look very different. The schedule, the priorities, the cups, the buckets, all of that, totally different. So this is not you do it one and done. This is you do it and you reevaluate it over and over again because we have different priorities at different points of our lives and different needs and different, goals and different things that bring us happiness. And that's the other key part of it is and that's where the habit, you said this earlier, a lot of the pieces is the habit. A great example is I was like, I go to this class after I'm done teaching. I go to another class at the studio and I'm like, oh, I love it. It's great. And then when I looked at it, if my goal is to achieve these things in my health and wellness, that class wasn't getting me anything in addition to what I'm already getting. Like it
Yeah. You
wasn't
didn't need to
getting me
work
to
out
a
more.
different yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't need to work out more. It wasn't getting me to a zone 5. It was still keeping
And
me in zone 1
it
for
takes time
heartbeat.
away from something else. Yeah.
It takes time away from something else. And yes, I enjoy it, but then I'm like, but in my like in my core values, in what brings me happiness, in what I want out of my life right now, this is not getting it. And that's taking 2 hours out.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
"Is that
It's
worth
such a
it?" And I'm like, "Whoa,
yeah.
you know what I could do in 2 hours? I could have this conversation with you. I could like
Yeah.
make my checklist. I could do all of these things." And I
You
was
could read
doing
one of
that,
those books that
and
we
part of
talk
it
about.
was
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, imagine if you found 2 hours in your day, Chris, like, you'd be like, "What? I just won the
I know.
lottery," you
Well,
know?
and but to
And
your
so
point is so well taken, though. It's not just finding the 2 hours, it's finding the 2 hours and not filling them with your same old crap. It's finding those 2
mm,
hours and not taking the
yes,
bait of, "Oh, now I can just, will do more work, or I can balance that extra portfolio thing that I'm doing, or I can, do more yard work, or right? It's finding those 2 hours and
right.
saying, "Oh, what was on my if I have endless money and I'm gonna do this thing, it was saving the children. So in these 2 hours, I'm gonna go do that literacy training that I need to be able to, tutor kids
Yeah.
after school on Zoom.
Oh,
Or
that's
I'm gonna, listen to this audiobook because I need to make dinner, but I'm committed to I would just read books all day on the beach. Well, I can't go to the beach, but I can at least get the book part done. And I think
right.
that's a really
Or
relevant thing
right.
because that's the responsibility of it, is not externalizing. I can't really emphasize this enough, and I'm emphasizing it again. I'm always talking to myself in these podcasts because to externalize it takes all the power, right? It takes all the power
Yeah.
from us, and the responsibility lies here within, in my own person. And in my own person, I have the ability to do things differently and not take the bait of, right, you're saying, imagine I had 2 hours. What would such a critical
Yeah.
question I'm asking myself literally right now in the moment. What would I do if I had 2 free hours? And
What
I
would you
do,
intentionally do?
right? And we make up that we don't have 2 free hours, but you do. The only person
Right.
putting those constrictions, unless you're in a prison camp, which most of us aren't. But if you are, that's a whole different
Yeah.
story. We are talking about householders who have choices and opportunities to be responsible for your own happiness. Yeah.
Well, and then, like, one more area that I realized is I had some things on there, like you said, like doing the yard, like being in the yard. And I'm like, I do my yard. I live in the jungle. Like, it's a real job
You do.
here.
You do really
And then
live
the
in the
question
jungle.
is yeah. And the question is, like, I know what chunk of time it takes me every other week. And then, different times it gets more intense, right? And so that went into a bucket of like, I do this. It brings me fulfillment. Like after I'm done, I'm always like, wow, this brings me like I'm proud of the work that I've done. I feel strong that I did it on my own. I'm proud of it. But there's a lot of joy I can get in a lot of places. Is that joy the one I want? And because I'm picking on this one is like, can be easily outsourced. It can be.
Mhm.
It just
Yeah.
costs, right?
I've been
And that's always
outsourcing
like, that's a
dinner all
factor.
week, Rach. I know all about
Yeah.
outsourcing this
So
week.
I'm not good. This
Yeah.
is my area. I'm not good at outsourcing. I like to do it myself. And so this was a
Mhm.
lesson for me to realize what's on my list that I can outsource easily and mindfully, and what's the cost of that, but also what's the benefit? What do I
What's the
get back in
game?
return those hours? What's the gain, and how is that monetarily going to affect me, emotionally going to affect me? And so that's the other question is, when you make your list, like, are there things that I have on this list that I can outsource? And that might not be outsourced to someone else and pay someone else. That might be, this is now a chore for my son, or this is now a chore
Right.
for my
Right.
partner,
Well,
or something my partner can
still
do,
kind of outsourcing
right?
it.
To like,
Well,
right.
yes,
Yeah.
because you
So it's
bring
still
up
outsourcing, but not in the traditional, like, I'm going to hire someone to do my yard. But like, there's interesting pieces when you do this exercise that you can ask yourself, like, just because it brings you joy, is it essential? And is this an easy one to lift up and pass to someone else?
which is what I love about that, even that comment. I love this because as you're talking about it, what's coming up for me is this is such a great exercise for us to do as individuals, and then for us to expand that as couples and expand that as families, because
Absolutely.
we're all a unit. I always say, like, moving my family around is like moving a dinosaur, right? So it's like a cruise ship, because there's so many of us, right? So it's just like, where's the dinosaur going to go? Well, we have to make really intentional efforts because this is a massive, huge thing. It's like one foot goes there and that does not move the dinosaur, right? If someone turns
Right.
their head, that doesn't move the dinosaur. So being able to not only, this is so great, right? Because I think for a lot of us, it just depends on your relationship status and your family status and your friend status. But
Mhm.
our lives are not lived independently. There are other pieces that
Yes.
come in warped in here together. So being responsible for your own happiness, and then being responsible to have either the conversation or the boundary or whatever it is with other people in your life to say, hey, these are things that are really important to me. What's important to you? This is where the conflict lies, because it's important for me to have a clean kitchen and it's not important for you to do the dishes. So what are we going to do about that? Like, where is that?
Yeah.
That's a massive disconnect. And by the way, that's like impacting my happiness on a daily basis because, what brings me joy is XYZ, right? So even being able to expand it after you're done intentionally putting that together to your work cycle, to your partner, to your kids, whatever, because that's for me, that's the constriction of what's coming at me is all the external demands. So if I can get some buy-in and cooperation in what the other people around me are trying to do with their lives, then that helps me understand where my I forget what color it is. This green is green, the stuff that can kind of go away. My stuff that is more flexible, right? If that's a pink for them and it's a green for me, then I can let it live as a pink for them. I can either decide to take it on or not, right? Like I can decide like, hey, that's a pink for you, because that's another area that really comes into conflict. And she talks about this in the article, really related to couples, like married couples and the distribution of work and, how jobs get defined and, how your life even just gets trotted out in front of you before you even have the say in it. So I also love being able to be responsible for it right there and then communicate it within your relationship or your family dynamic to appreciate where is your joy being zapped and why. And, because a way to remove stress is to remove stressor, right? So you can't remove your kids. You can't take your 3-year-old and say, I'm done with this. Here you go, Walmart. You take this kid. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So you have to have, and, until your kids are like 8 or 10, they can't really be as much in this conversation. Your job is to manage that all yourself, really, to find the happiness and find the joy within them for yourself, to generate that yourself. So yeah, I love this conversation because there's so much utility in my function, when she talks about your utility function, it's like, wow, I have to really get clear, and we have such a great opportunity to really get clear on our one precious life. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. Like, I didn't think about potentially doing this with my son. So, one, he can understand what my priorities are, and I can understand
Yeah.
his and support all of his pinks, and he can support mine. Right. And
And
that would be a
at least
beautiful
know
thing
that
in a family to
that it's a
know that it's a pink, and like even just like be like this, and even have the language be like, this is a pink right now. Like, you can even call it
yes,
out, right?
yes,
And he could call it out.
yes,
And he's like, I was like, you can't do
yeah,
that. And he's like, but mom, this is a pink. I'd be like, okay, whoa, that means a lot here.
right,
Like, I understand that.
yes,
And
so good, Rich.
that is a really cool idea of like, it becomes a whole family. And here we are towards the end of the year, right? New Year's, we start
Yes,
a new year. You can choose to use that as your demarcation or not. I like to use it as a
that's
point of like looking back, planning forward. And this is a beautiful way. Like, what if we could set up 2026 in a way of
right.
understanding our family dynamics, what everybody needs, and brings them closer to happiness, and support
I
one
love
another
it.
in that. And then being clear of
Yeah,
like how we are laying that out. Like, how can we make 2026 intentional, and with attention to our own happiness. And I think it's possible. And of course, it's going to take like, maybe it's a quarterly board meeting in your family, to like reassess.
yeah. I mean,
But
yeah. I
whatever
mean,
that
we don't
is.
do family meeting, but it's a good point. Even that's even a good point. Well, if you have a board meeting at work, I used to go to our board meetings every month on the money. It's at this time, it's at this place, this is happening, and we don't have the same requirements for
Yeah.
our family. Yet our family is way more like important, like way more influential on our day to
Totally.
day life, right? That in terms of this
Happiness.
kind of stuff. So yeah, it's such a good, yeah, I love all that. And I love the language and
Yeah.
the way to describe it, that mom, this is a pink. Like if my daughters were able to say, this is a pink for me, I'm just gonna reflect like, okay, like I get that. And then by extension, we're also teaching them how to be in a system, be in a relationship system, be in a
Mm,
family system, being a friend system, whatever your system is, you
mhm.
like we always say, if you unless you're gonna be a monk, and even there you're in a system because you have to cooperate to like get the get the work done and stuff like that in
Yeah.
silence. I don't know how I don't know how they get that done, but yeah, you're part of a system. And if we can start even by our own example of leading with responsibility and intention and all those elements, then we can by
Mm,
extension, lead that our kids to set them up, for happy and fulfilling lives, which circles back to us, by the way, because, if your kids are happy, you're only as happy as your, saddest child. We say that a lot, or you're only as, as
right.
okay as if your child's sick, you just can't deal with it. But being able to, as your family evolves, like you're saying, and keeps getting older, and then that feeds back into your system, into your 80s and 90s. Like it's just a
Right. It
continually
does.
evolving process. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And I think, I'm still like, I don't know if with a partner, and people can think about this like doing your like a mini board meeting just with your partner or your husband, spouse, whatever, and
Yeah,
then doing with the family unit. And, my family unit also includes my mom who lives next door. Like, can I understand what her
yeah,
kinks are, and help support her in that. And so how you structure this can be lots of ways, but it's exciting to me because it's going back to not like moving through your days with unawareness, which I can fall into, and bringing them to move through my days with awareness, and with
yeah. And
intention.
then we
So,
can come
you
up kind
know,
of for me, it's also like having the metric at the end, how are we going to be able to evaluate that? I guess we can evaluate it just on how are you feeling on a day-to-day basis. That's one way. It's kind of
yeah,
I don't know, like it's kind of a good way, I guess. But also though, like, are you happy? that yes, that's
right.
actually a great way to evaluate it and let yourself be happy. Let yourself be happy because you didn't fill those 2 hours. And that can generate happiness. That doesn't have to generate shame and, judgment. That can generate happiness. You know what I did? I had 2 free hours and I just laid on the couch or I just watched the birds outside. I've got these hummingbirds that are freaking amazing to watch, right? I just did that for 2 hours because that fits into my happiness. If you have to delineate it on a spreadsheet so that you feel okay doing that because, it contributes to your happiness and you could say, oh, but I've already defined it on my spreadsheet. We're these kind of people, right? So it's like, oh no, it's right
Right.
here. Item number 9. You can go if you have 2 hours, you can watch hummingbirds because that's going to make you happy. That's part of your happiness function. You're like, oh, it's in my happiness function. Okay, it's a variable. I'm going to put that variable in. So there's so many great things of this. What I love about these conversations, Rach, even as we're like getting to closing out here, is how we start. And I hope that everyone listening can evolve with us because as we start these conversations to have a very basic kind of framework of conversation, it's so important to find someone that you can go through this with. So if if our tribe is listening to us and they started at the beginning of this conversation and they see where we've come by the end of this conversation, not only with feeling good about it, but having some actionable steps, some things that we can do, some very practical framework to look at it, through through a grateful, not greedy lens. I'm not going to be greedy sitting there saying like, I don't have time for this. I can't go to Cambodia.
Mhm.
I can never read books. No, I'm going to start putting those audibles in my car because I'm in my car for 2 hours. I'm going to start, getting my literacy training at the library because I can work with kids right here locally, whatever it is, being able to follow this conversation and seeing what even what you can get done in an hour of intentional thought and we
Mhm.
dialogue. That's the way we grow. So if other people can come along with us and
Yes.
dialogue with us and then become part of that, then in the future we'll be able to workshop this with groups and have even more impactful ways to develop these concepts. So I'm super grateful to you, Rach. This has been an amazing
Thanks.
conversation. There's so many takeaways. I can't even list them. I feel like I've been listing them all along, but really the key takeaways for me are the responsibility for your own happiness, being not shaming yourself for
Mhm.
taking the time that you have to create your happiness, and then doing your exercise that you're talking about of chunking the tasks or the things that you have in your life to create your own happiness. And if you want to do that with a partner, by extension, that could be a great way to even get even more fulfillment, on a larger scale.
Yeah, and I want to add on to that part, the like doing it with your family unit too. Like that's such just a awesome idea to give everybody the language of that. I definitely want to have that conversation because it would be helpful because that's what we want to support one another in our happiness, right? Like that's one of the beauties of it.
Yeah, we're family.
So, yeah, it's been
Yeah.
really great for me. Even just chat through it, it generates more ideas and more excitement to like go back and look at things again and to reevaluate. And that's the beauty of a conversation is the exchange of information and the growth that happens. So I'm super grateful.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
kudos to you though, Rach, too. I think and I'll just, say this to anyone listening too. Like it's so valuable to be in these conversations with someone that you trust and you have the greatest faith in and that can move through these conversations. So if we are doing this for anyone who's listening, I'm so grateful to have, people be able to go through these conversations and that it just allows all of us to
Mhm.
weave in these conversations even more so with more people. And that's really the goal, right? Just to bring in people into your life that can evolve with you and grow with you and have these kinds of conversations and to live with intention. So grateful, 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 not greedy ever that we don't have enough time, that it's not like this, that it's not like that. So I so appreciate you, Rach. This has been awesome. And with that, I will say that it is, and forever will be the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. And aloha, Rach.
Aloha, Chris. Thank you.